Northern British Columbia wakes up slowly. The fog doesn't lift so much as it thins, revealing a long, quiet stretch of Highway 16, 724 kilometers, or about 450 miles, heading through forests, mountains, and a pocket of small towns separated by long distances. On here, the shoulder of the highway tells its own story: boot prints, tire tracks, a discarded coffee cup, a single glove. Things that don't mean anything on their own, but together, they hint at how many people passed through this corridor and how many never made it home. For more than 50 years, families along this route have waited for daughters, sisters, and mothers who vanished somewhere between one town and the next. Some were hitchhiking because there was no other way to get to where they needed to go. Some were traveling short distances, 20 or 30 kilometers, or about 12 or 18 miles. The kind of trip most of us don't think twice about. This place has a name now. This is the Highway of Tears. And while the world knows a handful of these cases, most remain in the shadows, stories carried by families, by communities, and by the land itself.
Today we're going to talk about 3 women whose names don't always make the headlines, but whose disappearances reveal the deeper patterns along this corridor. 3 stories, 3 families still searching for answers, and a highway that holds far too many of them.
Hey, coworkers.
Welcome to Coworkers in Crime, the podcast where office chatter meets crime discussion.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Crystal.
Yes, we really do work together.
And yes, we're totally obsessed with true crime.
From water cooler whispers to cold case deep dives,
we're here to bring you stories that keep us chatting way past our coffee breaks.
So grab your coffee,
lock your desk drawer, and let's get into this week's case.
Hey, Crystal. Today I thought we would go to Canada. So I don't think you need your passport for that, since you said a couple episodes ago yours wasn't up to date.
It's not. No.
Are you going to
change that last name still. Do you need a passport to go to Canada? I did wonder about that, because it's by land. Yeah, I think you still do, right?
I think you do
to get back in.
Yeah, to get back in.
Yeah.
So this is a case that I have heard of, or these cases. Not these particular 3 that we're going to discuss, but I have heard about this Highway of Tears in Canada. If you do any research with Indigenous women, this always comes up. You Google search it, this is going to come up. And it's very sad. There are a lot of cases, a lot of missing person cases. I have seen everything from 40 up to 80 different missing person cases. And I did look up to see how many of these are solved, and sadly, only 1 has ever been solved.
It's unbelievable statistics to me.
It's crazy statistics to me, too. And so that's why I wanted to bring attention to these cases that don't necessarily get the same attention as some of the other ones when you talk about the Highway of Tears.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I didn't even know about the Highway of Tears till you told me about it. And it's such a... Once you look into it, it's almost like, how could you not have heard about it? So when you're saying this might not have gotten the attention, you're absolutely right. For someone who focuses on true crime and likes to look into true crime, it's really weird to not see a lot about this. I mean, in my mind, this is pretty prominent. When you've got that many disappearances, only 1 solve, I think I would hear a lot about that, but you don't. I mean, even this morning, when we were going back and forth of the cornhole, the quadriplegic, that guy, when we were talking about that this morning, Philip was like, "Hey, did you hear about?" And I was like, "Yep, already did." I answered him before he finished. He was like, "Hey, I was talking about this," and I was like, "The quadriplegic," and he said, "Of course, you already know about it." I mean, but it was immediate. So when you have something that it's like, it's very rare for you to not hear about, at least hear about it. Maybe you didn't look completely into it, but peripherally you heard about it. And I did not know about this until you mentioned it. So it's very interesting to me, something so many people and such a prominent area known for that I wouldn't have had any idea. It's very crazy.
Yeah, I think that whole group of people, of Indigenous people, is just an underserved, overlooked community of people. And when their people go missing, good luck.
Yeah.
I don't think they get the same responses, and that, to me, that needs to change.
Yeah.
If you're a missing person, you're a missing person.
Correct.
So, yeah. So let's start with Tamara.
Tamara Chipman was 22 years old, a young mother, a member of Gitxsan Nation. Her family describes her as funny, stubborn, and fiercely loyal, the kind of person who filled a room without trying. On September 21st, 2005, she was last seen near Prince Rupert hiking along Highway 6. The stretch between Prince Rupert and Terrace is about 145 kilometers or 90 miles. For people in this region, hitchhiking wasn't a last resort, it was transportation. Tamara was headed to Terrace to visit friends, and she never arrived. Her father, Tom Chipman, reported her missing right away. Tamara's family didn't wait. They searched the shoulders of the highway themselves. They put up posters. They talked to drivers. They walked the gravel and the brush. But no trace of Tamara has ever been found. Her case became one of the 18 files reviewed by Project EPANA. The RCMP, better known as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, created this to investigate disappearances and murders along highways 16, 97, and 5. Even with that designation, the case still remains unsolved. So, Rachel, when you look at Tamara's case, what does it tell you about how transportation, or the lack thereof, shaped the risk along this corridor? Like, I've never been told hitchhiking is the way to go.
Oh,
Never.
right. Me either. I think trying to think of when, like, it was, because you heard people like, oh, I used
Mhm.
to hitchhike all the time. And I'm not sure when that stopped. I want to say
Yeah,
like the 80s, maybe like
probably.
the late 80s became the time when, people stopped hitchhiking for safety reasons. But it sounds like in this area, it it's the only way to get around.
Yeah.
Unless, because I'm assuming maybe not a lot of people have cars or there's not a lot of public transportation. And and you just hear of all the dangers of hitchhiking. But that leads me to when we use, like, ride shares, we're basically it's the same thing. You're getting in the car with a stranger.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, but it feels safer somehow, but you're right. I didn't even, yeah, new
I
fear
mean, my
unlocked.
sister and I have, like, when we're in a any taxi or ride share, you know, taking a picture of whatever identifying information we can find, and we send it to each other. And then
Mhm.
it's, "Hey, I should be at my destination in 45 minutes." And we have a code word that
Yeah.
we have to send to the other person when we get to that location so that we know. It's not
And
someone grabbing our phone and saying, "Hey, I made it." So,
oh, yeah.
it's
And ride shares are getting smarter. Well, like Uber, at least. Mine says who is the person that you want to follow where you're at. So like it immediately when the ride picks me up, it says share location. And I know the driver sees that, like can see that I am sharing my location with somebody. And I always put in my phone what way we're supposed to turn and stuff so that if there's traffic and they go a different way, I'm not like, "What are you doing?" You know? So I wanna see, like, why are they choosing that way, especially because I am in a city I don't know usually when I take Ubers. I don't take them locally. I'm usually traveling, so I'll look at, "Okay, they're supposed to go left here. If they don't, that's gonna make me wonder why." So, interesting. I never really connected ride shares with the same idea as hitchhiking. And I would have never considered hitchhiking as a form of public transportation, but what a like precisely what it is. It is public transportation. The public is transporting each other around. Pretty interesting.
yeah, it really does just show how vulnerable, like, w some areas still are. The vastness of areas require you to get from one community to another. You have to rely on strangers, and
Mhm.
danger isn't a choice anymore. It's, like, your only option.
Yeah, 2005. This is not when I would have thought hitchhiking was at a peak.
Right. So our next case is Madison Scott. Maddie, as she was known, was 20 years old when she disappeared on May 28th, 2011. She'd gone camping with friends at Hogsback Lake, about 25 kilometers or 15 miles southeast of Vanderhoof. It was supposed to be a fun night, a birthday celebration, people coming and going, music, a fire. And at some point, Maddie was left alone at the campsite. The next morning, her tent was still there, her truck was still there, her belongings were still there. But Maddie was gone. Her disappearance sparked one of the largest community led searches in northern BC, British Columbia. Volunteers searched on foot and horseback, with ATVs, with helicopters. Her family never stopped looking. They held vigils, they put up billboards, they worked with the RCMP, and they kept her story alive. And then in 2023, 12 years after she vanished, her remains were found on a rural property east of Vanderhoof. RCMP confirmed the identification, but they released very few details.
Mm. Her case shows how long families live in that space between hope and grief. Sometimes just for a couple of years, and then now sometimes, in this case, decades.
And it
Well,
shows that
not decades, I
disappearances.
guess. Sorry. Over a decade.
Well, a
So,
decade, yeah. Well,
yeah.
some cases are decades.
Yes,
So,
as we've seen. I mean,
yeah,
we just dealt with these last 2 cases we worked on. So, yeah, this is
yeah,
sad.
and this is a sad one. And it shows that disappearances in this region don't always follow the same pattern. Maddie wasn't hitchhiking. She wasn't alone on a highway. She was at a campsite with friends.
Do you think the scale of the search for Maddie reflected a shift in public awareness, or was it just unique to her case?
Maybe both. By 2011, the Highway of Tears was already part of the national conversation, but Maddie's case also received immediate, widespread attention, something many Indigenous families never get, and that disparity matters. And I think her family's level of like, we got to go search for her. We got, just putting everything out there. I mean, they still waited, even with all that immediate action that they took. It still took 12 years.
Looking at so this private property she was found on. I mean, I guess that I'm sure they looked into that and it just didn't mean anything. I mean, I'm finding that she was found in May of 2023. I mean,
Almost 13 years to the day,
right, almost to the day.
or 12
And
years.
yeah, and this rural property, uh, the police haven't publicly given the exact location. A lot of the online discussion further than that, it's that the investigation is still active because of where they found her. So they've not released it. It's like vague. Like there's no exact location given, just that. But the word that stands out to me there is that they found her on a property. Like, on the word property makes me think it's owned by someone. It's gotta be connected to somebody. Otherwise they would have just said open land, or they found her in the wilderness. That's not said. It's said property. So that's interesting. And then that the police haven't given an exact location. So this one,
And I
and
feel
being that
like
that's in
that's
23, it's still active. Who
right.
knows who knows what they
And
know now.
it's and I feel like that's what a lot of these cases are like. There's not a lot of information. Um, like I said, there's a lot of cases we could have dug into on this one, and I tried to really find 3 that were maybe not as publicized as some of the others.
Mhm.
But with that, that means there's not a lot of information. We discovered that, like with Samantha Folsom's
Yeah.
case, where, we had trouble finding information there. So the same thing is pretty much here with these cases.
I think we sort of put a lot of guardrails on ourselves in this, and I don't want to change them, but it is something that it's like we want to focus on these lower attention cases that didn't get a lot of publicity. But also, when you start really digging into those, the only thing you're going to find is word of mouth, because there's not a lot of investigation on them either. Sometimes that's why they're not as publicized, because they don't have any answers. So they just don't put anything out there. And you and I don't like to validate or publicize things that aren't concrete. So it puts it to where we can only put out very little information to people, but also we should all be demanding answers for something like this. I would think, especially locally, I'm sure they do. But the pressure that gets put on certain cases, it causes, hey, go figure this out. But this shouldn't be something like, I don't know. I don't want to go off too far on a tangent on it, but it makes it really difficult for us to put more information out when you just can't. You hit these dead ends. I thought I was going to look into where they found her in here. They've connected it to a source. They're trying to find if there's any connection to this, at least a little bit more. But to say they're not publicizing anything interesting. So I don't know. That's my little bit on it, I guess.
Yeah, if anyone's listening from Canada, like, are your investigations more locked down than they are here in the US? Like, I feel like the ones that are highly publicized, you hear a lot about what's going on at the various stages, where maybe it's different in Canada where they just, keep the investigation close to the vest. I'd be interested to hear from any of our, Canadian listeners or someone who's, from there and can you give us that info? Like, is that how it is?
Well, and remember, Canada is one sovereign. So it's not like they have, like here, we have Florida as a sunshine state. There is nothing you can't find out. We'll show you all of it. There's no gag orders. There's no this is locked down until. But you look at like the Corey Richins case, they wouldn't release her mugshot until she was convicted. So unless you're convicted, they won't even release your picture because if you're not convicted, it's gone, it's washed, which is really interesting. So just the differences between state to state here and what we're allowed to release and not, and how locked down or gag orders, there's already gag orders being put on some of the more recent cases that have started to happen and that they're coming out. But it depends on the state you're in, which sovereign, right? Canada, whatever their sovereign says of how they release things, I am curious to know that because whatever it is in one place of Canada, it's all over. Yeah,
Right.
let us know. So the next one is Immaculate. Mackie Basil. Mackie was 26 years old. She disappeared June 13th of 2013. She was last seen in Kuz Che Reserve. Kuz Che Reserve is close to Fort St. James, about 160 kilometers or 100 miles northwest of Prince George. Mackie was part of the Dakelh people, also known as the carrier people. Her family described her as gentle, soft spoken, and deeply connected to her community. On the night she disappeared, she was reportedly with acquaintances. CBC Indigenous reporting notes inconsistency in their accounts. What is consistent is that Mackie left on foot and was never seen again. Her family organized immediate searches. They walked the bush, they checked the trails. They worked closely with Carrier Sakani Family Services, which has documented her case extensively. But like Tamara and like so many others, no trace of Mackie has ever been found. Her case highlights how disappearances in this region often fall into gaps between jurisdictions. So RCMP detachments, First Nations policing, vast distances, limited resources. So gaps
Well,
in jurisdictions, basically. I mean, what does Mackie's case tell you about the role of community organizations in these investigations?
oh, it shows me that they are doing the work. The families and these Indigenous led groups, they're often doing the work that institutions don't. Documenting those timelines, organizing searches, keeping the story alive, keeping it out there. And I think those are the things that you feel like they shouldn't have to do. Like, why aren't they getting that, same level of exposure as other cases? And, I almost wonder, and I don't know, like, even here, we have, Native American lands, and do they self-police? Like, or do state police get involved when, like, what level is there that overlap? So if this happened in an area like that and there isn't that overlap, then is that the reason why it doesn't get the same level of attention as a case that is outside those tribal lands, you
It makes
know?
me think should look into sovereign citizenship, and learn a little more about that because I would think that those areas that you're talking about, I would think they fall under different law.
Mhm.
I'm curious about how that works, and it makes me wonder if we have those pockets here too or how they govern. Is it self-governed? how is that? So I'm curious. That does hit something that I've had thoughts about before.
Yeah. Oh, this was a heavy one. Sorry.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
But an important one. Heavy
Well, and
but
you're
important.
we're talking about 3 out of some say 40, some say 80 people,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know?
we're talking about such a small percentage of all these cases, and yeah, this one has always stuck with me only because of like, are they tied together, or is this just a highway of convenience for people who don't like to do good things, you know? So when you look at these 3 cases together, Tamara, Maddie, and Mackie, you start to see the patterns that define the Highway of Tears. And it's not just one thing, it's the web of geography, infrastructure, policing, and history that all intersect in ways that make Indigenous women especially vulnerable.
And it's striking how consistent those patterns are, even though the cases themselves are so different. Tamara hitchhiking and Prince Rupert, Maddie disappearing at a campsite, and Mackie goes missing near Kuz Che. 3 different circumstances, 3 different communities, but it's still the same underlying risk.
And let's stop and talk about the transportation for a minute because I think you and I growing up here in the United States, public transportation or there was always a car ride or the people you were going to be with or places you needed to go may have been within reasonable walking distance. Because in a lot of these, that's what comes up again and again. And for decades, there's no reliable public transportation along Highway 16. None. If you didn't have a car, and a lot of people didn't, you hitchhiked. That was the system. That was the norm.
Which is still unbelievable in the 2000s, anywhere near the 2000s, but that's something people outside the region just don't always understand. Hitchhiking there isn't a dangerous choice. It was the only option. If you need to get to work or school or a medical appointment or even just the next town over, you stuck out your thumb. Unbelievable. In my mind,
Yeah,
unbelievable. Obviously, to them, no different than taking an Uber.
right. And I mean, and some of these towns can be, um, 50 to 80 kilometers, which is 30 to 50 miles away. I don't know about you, but I'm not used to the next town
Long
being
time in a
that
car
far
with
away,
yeah,
right?
that's a
Like
long
that's a
time to sit in the car with somebody that you don't know.
Yeah. And that's where it creates that vulnerability because once you're on the side of the highway, it's a luck of the draw. You're relying on whoever stops. And if something happens, there are long stretches, no witnesses, no cameras, no cell phone service, and no one around for kilometers or miles.
And that isolation is the second big pattern, geography. The region is stunning. I did look at a map. It's a long stretch of highway and then fork offs of those highways. But it's also unforgiving. Dense forest, steep terrain, rivers, logging roads that go on forever. If someone goes missing, the search area is so massive. Evidence disappears quickly. Weather erodes the tracks and erases any kind of footprints or tire marks or anything. The wilderness scatters remains, animals picking up things. It's so vast.
Yeah, and this almost makes me think of like the national park ones when we did that episode about the Tetons
Mhm.
was the vastness of the search area when someone goes missing. So
Yep.
could some of these cases be someone took a wrong turn?
Or Eastall,
Yeah.
the
Like
Eastall woman. Mhm.
yeah, so just those things just keep popping into my mind, when I read about these different cases. Now, there's a lot of them, so I feel like there's something sketchy, but um, you know, it just made me think when you said the vastness, I was like, that's kind of like the national parks. Like there's just acres upon acres to look for someone. So, and then, we add jurisdiction fragmentation on top of that. You've got RCMP detachments in Prince Rupert, Terrace, Smithers, Burns Lake, Vanderhoof, Fort St. James, Prince George, each with different staffing levels, different priorities, and different caseloads.
Yeah. And then First Nations policing on top of that, and volunteer search groups and community led efforts. And sometimes no one is sure who's supposed to take the lead. So I guess everyone just kind of stands still.
Yeah,
You move or me move or who moves.
yeah, it's exactly. And when a case falls between these jurisdictions, families often feel like they're the ones holding everything together, coordinating searches, documenting the timelines, pushing for updates. And their job should be to not to be doing all of that. Their job should be, missing their person, trying, participating in the searches, not
Right.
coordinating them. Like, you hear about that all the time, families coordinating searches, and I'm always baffled. I'm like, why isn't somebody else coordinating this search? Why is it left to the family who's already in a state of shock and disbelief? Why is it up to them?
And documenting the timelines, that's unfortunate that you feel. I can understand, like, looking for a timeline that might have been missed. There are cases we hear where the sister found out that she called this person at this time, and the only reason they know that is, they were at lunch with somebody, and like, "Oh, yeah, I didn't know you talked to her that night." Little things like that that the police may not have gotten to, but the entire timeline that they're having to document everything is absolutely crazy to me. That is unfair. But it does bring up the hardest pattern to talk about, which is systemic racism, because you can't look at these cases or the highways of tears as a whole without acknowledging how often it's Indigenous families that were dismissed or ignored when the first report of someone missing happens.
And these families have said for decades, they're told things like, "Oh, she probably ran away." How many times do we hear that as, like, the first
Mhm.
response for a missing person case?
Yeah.
Or, "She'll turn up. She's out partying." And those assumptions cost time, critical time at the beginning of a missing person case.
Yeah, and you can see the impact of that in Tamara's case. Her father reports her missing immediately and describes how the response was slow and frustrating. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. It's kind of like how we heard with Turner. It was like, oh, she's a drug addict, therefore she was going through a relapse, or she must be out partying. Like, you immediately dismiss. And if that's the case, why wouldn't their family be habitual reporters and just constantly reporting? If that's the case, how many times have I reported them missing? Not never. So I'm telling you something's off. I think we should take that more seriously. I can understand when we're crying wolf and calling all the time, but if this is the first time I've ever said, hey, this is out of the norm, guess what? It is out of the norm. How many times have I called you? You see what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, why are we taking that as passive as we are?
And I think families and close friends know that person better than authorities. So if I were to say, "Crystal went missing," and it's only been, like, 6 hours, well,
Mhm.
there's a good reason why I'm calling you to say Crystal went missing, because
Right.
I know her, and she's not gonna go this long or whatever. Like, I just always it baffles me that they're like, they're just out partying or whatever the case may be. It's like,
Yeah.
"No, I know this person. You do not know this person." And I understand resources and all that, and, you know, but I just feel like we don't that it's not always taken as seriously as I think it could be in those immediate hours after someone notices someone's
Yeah.
missing.
I went back and looked at the case in Columbus where the husband and wife, he didn't show up to work.
Mhm.
He was a dentist, right? And he didn't show up
Yeah.
to work. And his boss called from vacation to say, "Can you go do a wellness check? This person didn't show up to work." I re-listened to all of the 911 calls of that I mean, this was like 2 days ago while I was cleaning. And it's still, I don't know if it just hearing it again, always hearing it the first time you're taking it in, but you're exactly right. Like, they're saying, "Okay, he didn't show up to work." And they're like, "Yeah, but we also can't get a hold of his wife, and that's really weird, and they have young children, and this is just not like, this is not okay. Something's wrong." And it's like, "Okay." And the dismissiveness in the reporting was so jarring. And of course, now you know the end, you know what happened in the end, but it makes me wonder how many of those cases were out there that people call in and say, "Hey, but look, this is not common." And you're having to convince the person on the other end that this is urgent and severe. I feel like this is one of those things that we should just assume the worst and hope for the best when you're a dispatcher or when you're a police officer. Let's just assume that this is the worst case scenario until we can prove it's not. And unfortunately, that's just not what happens. And we look at, okay, but didn't you say that she's a partier or whatever? That shouldn't even, facts not in evidence, man. Like, come on, like go get to the house and see if you can figure out what's going on.
And I just think the response rate too in these cases along this highway are also vastly different. And we see it all the time. So let's, if we go back to Maddie's case, she's a young white woman, and the response was immediate and massive. Hundreds of volunteers, helicopters, billboards, media coverage. And it's not that she didn't deserve that response. I'm not saying that at all because she absolutely did. But every family deserves that kind of response.
Yeah. And the disparity tells you something about whose story is getting amplified, whose case gets resources, and whose family gets believed.
And that's why community-led search efforts are such a big part of the Highway of Tears story. Families and Indigenous organizations like Carrier Sakani Family Services have done so much of the work that institutions didn't.
They're the ones organizing searches, the ones documenting timelines. They're the ones keeping cases in the public eye, and the ones supporting each other when the system doesn't. It's a lot to carry. That's a lot.
That's a lot to carry. And that's the emotional labor that doesn't get talked about enough. The way families become investigators, advocates, archivists, search coordinators, all while they're grieving, like we were talking about just a few minutes ago.
Yeah. And all of this while knowing that the odds of getting answers are so slim. Can you imagine knowing the statistics that on the Highway of Tears, there have been, depending on who's reporting it, 40 at minimum people who have disappeared and only one solve, and then your person goes missing there, and you're like, I am likely never going to get answers, but your hope just has to carry you through that. Because the truth is, most of these cases are going to be unsolved not because the families didn't care, not because communities didn't search, but because the system wasn't built to protect them in the first place. So you know ahead of time, I'm probably not going to get the answers we're looking for here.
So when we talk about the Highway of Tears, we're not just talking about disappearances. We're talking about infrastructures. We're talking about colonialism. We're talking about resource allocations. We're talking about whose lives are treated as urgent.
It's so depressing. And we're talking about what justice looks like when the answers may never come.
When you look at these patterns, transportation, geography, policing, racism, which one feels like the biggest barrier to solving these cases to you, Crystal?
Um, More of a compound, I think, because if it were just geography, I mean, geography alone would be really hard to overcome, but maybe you could overcome that. Jurisdictional gaps, also difficult, um, but maybe you could fix just that. But when all those factors intersect, it's
Yeah. And I think that's the story of the Highway of Tears. It's that intersection of geography and transportation and policing, all that comes into play. And there's not just one case, there's not just one moment, but it's a system. It's all these things coming together that made these disappearances possible. And it makes justice so much more difficult to reach.
I do have a question. To me, this seems like, I mean, it could be one person doing this. It could be copycats doing this. But I almost wonder if it's people who have ill intention are like, oh, like they're like, it's a magnet. Why don't you just go here? Because look at all these jurisdictional gaps and look at how many unsolved. And if you're going to get away with something, this is likely where it's going to happen. So it could be a mixture of a bunch of people with bad intentions going up there and thinking, hey, no cameras, no cell phone service, gaps in jurisdiction, vast terrain. If I'm going to do something wrong, this is the place to do it? Or do you think this is one person who is just haunting this highway?
I think it's similar to like Alaska. If you look into Alaska, because of the vastness and the just so
Yeah.
much area that just doesn't have civilization,
Mhm.
you can get these people who have ill intentions going unchecked. And if it's the people who are going missing, I mean, we've talked about three out of how many cases, and only one of them got a lot of attention. Why? Every case needs the same attention, and every family that brings it forward needs the same attention.
And imagine what that would deter if you knew it was going to get a lot of attention. Think about if it is people with bad acts who want to do bad things, but they're like, man, every time someone disappears there, it gets blown up and everyone's talking about it and all this attention. I don't want that kind of attention. So
Right.
imagine what you could minimize just by giving it the proper attention. I want to live rent free in your head. The psychology in making it a big deal is going to naturally cause some avoidance, at least.
At
Maybe
least we
that's
hope it
helpful
would.
thinking. Yeah.
You and I, it might cause some avoidance,
Mhm.
but I think there's always those people who just have intent of doing ill will. They're
Yeah.
like, "I don't care. I get caught, I get caught." Again, Tamara Chipman, Madison Scott, Immaculate, Mackie, Basil. These are just 3 women, 3 families, 3 of the many stories that reveal the deeper truth on this highway of tears. They're part of a pattern shaped by the geography, the infrastructure, and the long shadow of colonialism.
And they're part of a crisis that continues to this day.
Yes, there are still women missing, there are still families searching, and this road is still long.
Yeah. If you have stories that you feel we should focus on from the Highway of Tears, please send them to us. This is one I think we could probably dig through infinitely,
This one we could
unfortunately.
do many, many follow-up episodes with. There's just so many cases we could highlight. And I purposely did leave out the unsolved one, mostly because I wanted to focus on the ones that were still open and still being
Mhm.
investigated versus the one that has resolution.
As of solved it, you mean? Because I don't know. As of solved, do you mean they know who did it, they know what happened?
They
You
connected
mean
it via DNA, yes.
okay. Yeah, interesting. I'm looking through the list of missing people here, and the scrolling is it's doom. It's just on and on and on and on of how many
Yeah.
people are connected.
Yeah. This one is, I don't know why this is one of those ones that has always just stuck with me. I don't know if it's because it's called the Highway of Tears or like, what about it? I did have a phase for a while where I got very into Native American culture, so I'm
Mhm.
sure this is what stemmed, that it came from that, just learning about Indigenous people and how a large number of them go missing on this stretch of highway, which just seems coincidence or not, just seems too much of a coincidence to be overlooked and to not be talking about it. Well,
Good
thanks for go
times. Oh
yeah,
gosh, how heavy. My gosh.
I'm sorry. Our choice of podcast
Yeah,
topic
I
is
mean,
is heavy, so
yep.
we're
Well,
gonna have a lot of these.
as we said the last time, can you imagine being able to talk about this and not feel anything? I mean, you
Right.
couldn't. You couldn't. And we talk about real cases, real people. We do these other ones where it's the history of how we got to these certain laws, and those make it I think those are good breaks for you and I when it comes to the emotional gap, but because we can take the emotion out of it and just look at the law and the legalese and how justice plays out. But when you get to the why and you get to the who and you get to the how and you start really digging into these people, it is so difficult to detach from the heaviness of what these families must feel. It's
And
difficult to
there's
do
and
that.
yeah, I mean, and they're living with it every single day. We're living with
Right.
it for while we're researching it, while we're recording it. I mean, I think a little bit of it stays with me all the time, but
Yeah.
not to the same level as the families
No,
who are dealing with this day in and day out.
it's a whole other body part for them. When you're dealing with this for decades, it's not even just the loss of someone at that point. It's now you have the loss and the unknown and grief. Now you have all these different pieces that sit with you, and what a different sit. What a different way to sit with you, because I'm not just dealing with loss anymore. It's extremely sad, and that heaviness is such a different heaviness. Knowing this horrible thing happened, we found this person, we solved it at least. There's some sort of justice as justice can gets done. Those hurt. Those are painful. Those are rough. Those are tough. These are cruel. This is cruel to have to deal with this in your lifetime. So I don't know. There's a breath I can't fully take when we talk about these. That's the best, as into words as I can put it.
And the last, I was just curious. I just quickly looked up when the last disappearance connected to this stretch of road. happened, according to the RCMP's investigation, they only include cases between 1969 and 2006. However, the
Six?
yeah,
Wow.
so but
And that's the police.
that's the police, right? But not formally classified under there. There have been recent missing person cases that have occurred along Highway 16, the most recent in October of 2023.
We have to do a,
I think we have to do a part 2. I wasn't gonna do a part 2,
well, we're gonna have
because
to
we've done so many part 1, part 2s that I was like,
I
I think
know,
we need to but
I
this
but the
almost seems like we need to, and it's not always women. I think the focus is on women,
Mhm.
but looking at one of the recent cases is, it's based on the name, I could be wrong, is a
Canada's
gentleman.
one sovereign. So how can you have this jurisdiction explains it this way and this it still should all report up to one sovereign state. You know what I'm saying? So how can it be a collective number? I can understand if we tried to pull like I-20 that goes across the country. I can understand how, well, Mississippi says this and Alabama says this and Georgia says this and Florida says this. And I can understand that. If we're talking about completely different states, completely different sovereigns. They track their own stuff. Nationally, they all roll up into one nation, right? So how is it that one sovereign that has no other sovereigns doesn't have a clear, some things fall through the cracks? How do you stop reporting in '06 as the police? Maybe I just got on the wrong, maybe that hit me completely wrong, but that
Maybe,
bugs
yeah,
me.
yeah, no, and it could just be they haven't officially added any cases, and, you've got those Indigenous community groups that are, you know, probably the driving force to most people knowing about these cases. I also think it's dangerous to even put out there that no new cases have been added since 2006. Because to me, I'd be like, "Oh, well, now it's a safe highway. They've cleared everything up. It's been 20 years,
But
nothing's
is that
happened."
the
But
intent? But is
but
that the intent? The
but that's
Tetons doesn't want to
misleading.
tell you how many people go missing because they don't
Well,
want you
I
to
know.
stop visiting the Tetons. So, I mean, of
I
course,
agree.
they're not going to put that out. But
But it's
this is what it
misleading.
is. When you tell me the last time we did a population check, we had 2,600 people in this little place. But then that was 4 years ago. But when you say 20 years ago, I'm like, brother, you don't know what's going on, do you? Like 20 years is a long time to not add an
Yeah.
update. That's a
And
long time.
I think that's why those community, the indigenous organizations and the
Yeah.
advocacy groups are so important to this case because they're the ones that are going, no, this stretch of highway is still dangerous. It's just not to the level of reporting that I guess we would like to see. So, yep, I think we're going to have to do another part to this. Maybe not for next week because it's going to take
Yeah.
us a little bit to dig into. But I think down the road, you may see a follow up episode or a continuation episode to this one.
Yeah, and I'm in the case notes, and I appreciate how much you put into the case notes this time because go look at the sources if you want to look into these family services and you because I think those groups deserve so much support. I mean, they are carrying, like you said, the emotional load that they are carrying, and to remind people to stay vigilant and saying no, like we have to be very careful here. I understand hitchhiking is safe. You can't do this without the, you know what I mean? I think that go look into those. If you're listening to this and this hits you the way it hits me, go in the case notes, read and further look into these like the carrier Sakani, um, the Highway of Tears Initiative and Symposium report, National Inquiry to MMIWG. Those are things you should look into. These are all the little things that Rachel has found and put into our case notes for this one. So if you want to look further into them, please do. These are some great organizations. So
Yeah, don't let this one go quiet.
no,
Whew.
please don't. Oh, yeah.
All right.
Until
Whew.
next time,
Until next time, coworkers.
my coworkers. That wraps up this week's episode.
Thanks for listening, whether you're at your office, at your home, or somewhere in between. We're glad you're here.
Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Like what you heard, leave us a review and share it with your coworkers.
Got a case you want us to cover or office drama that feels criminal? Send it to us at coworkers.crimepodcast@gmail.com or check the episode notes for all of our social handles. Until next time, coworkers.
Stay curious, stay safe, and stay caffeinated.